Right, so does anybody know this Travis guy standing next to me?
He's got long hair, I don't trust him.
All I know is whenever we were reviewing the RFPs, or whatever they're called, I don't know, sorry. Mine's over there. All I can say is this is cool as shit. Travis.
Howdy, y'all. When sending liquor to the stage, please let me know whether it's single malt or that other stuff. I appreciate it anyways. So today we're going to speak about active disk antiforensics, and this is so much fun because I was looking at antiforensics and there are all of these cool tricks in it. And the tricks that you see are kind of like web tricks in that they're easy to pick up. But at the same time, they're brutally effective in the same way that these simple little SQL injections can take down massive servers, right? So among them are, I think one of my favorites is that all of these forensic live CDs have partition signatures that tell them where to load the kernel from. You can put this on your hard disk, and then if someone tries to boot your computer with that disk, it will actually boot the second partition of your hard disk, which can wipe the first. And I love these tricks. There's so many of them, and they're so cool, but they have the problem that if your disk gets imaged first, there's jack shit you can do about it. So I built a disk. And when you control the disk, you can come up with these behaviors that allow you to recognize that you are being forensically analyzed, and then attack the host in reply by eliminating all of your data and switching to a clean image. So to do that, I used this board that you see on the screen. It's called the Facedancer 20. I have more than 2,000 of these waiting to be sent out by mail. So if you go to the website, you can send in your shipping address and they'll go out to you. And if you don't want to pay for them, you can do this cool thing where at the bottom you say, this is pro bono because I'm a student, or I'm broke, or I don't like PayPal, or I'm in Pakistan, and those are all valid excuses, and it still ships out. Now, if you can pay, that covers the others, and this has worked out over 4 years of this project, and we've never had a problem financially, which is nifty. So the other part of this is that USB is just a magic school bus. I was teaching Sergey Bradis' class up at Dartmouth, and he wanted me to talk about the different embedded buses in a workstation, right? So when I've got this laptop in front of me, there are lots of different chips on it, and they're speaking to each other over lots of different protocols. Among them are the things that we think about, like PCI Express, or PCI, those sorts of things. And USB, but there are also a lot of lower ones. It's the lower ones that we're speaking of. And Sergey started jumping up and down and screaming, it's not a bus, it's a network. And it really is a network. You can talk over USB in the same way you would talk over Ethernet. And the only reason we think that Ethernet is special is because TCP/IP won out and we forgot of all of the alternatives. No one remembers IPX SPX, so unless it's IP-based, we pretend that it's not a network. But they all are, and you can mess with them in the same way you would mess with a network. So this Facedancer is a network adapter. This allows you to speak USB yourself without anyone or any operating system in the way. It sends only the packets that you tell it to send, it sends you all the packets that it receives, and it allows you to emulate pretty much anything. The only thing we're having trouble emulating is a hub, and if you find a solution to that bug, I would be very happy. On the left, that side connects to your workstation, and you run a Python script. We have a Python script that emulates a USB serial port. We have a Python script that emulates USB disks, which I'll be speaking about today. We've got scripts that emulate the device firmware update protocol. So if you've got, say, a smart card reader or an iPhone or the rest, and you want a copy of the firmware, what you do is you use the script to clone the device. You say, I want this to be an iPhone. And then you do the firmware update, and the host software doesn't recognize that it's not what you're pretending to be. So it'll give you a copy of the firmware. And this is I've used this on several devices that have locked firmware in order to get a copy to find lower level exploits, because they always forget to protect it at that end. Now, when this becomes a disk, you just give it a disk image and it presents that to the host. So this is the boot sector as taken out by DD. Now this is the boot sector of Berliner Spargel OS, or the Berliner Asparagus operating system. I wrote this in this past Spargel site, or the Asparagus holiday. And Germans have a 90-day celebration of asparagus. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a stupid holiday, but I'm going to tell you that it's not, and I'll tell you why. Because Hanukkah is 8 days, Christmas is 1 or 12, but Spargelzeit is 90 days, which means that a child conceived at the end of one Spargelzeit, and there's a lot of conceiving during the asparagus season. A child conceived at the end of one Spargelzeit might be born at the beginning of the next. And this will be the Spargelkönig, or the Spargel King, who will usher in the Spargelwetter.
Say that 5 times.
So, the weird thing that I found when writing this was that USB mass storage is not that complicated. Awesome, thank you kindly. So now that I've got the single malt, we can get to the technical details. So when you're messing with the disk, there are all these different commands that you can use, and there are all these different ways that you can fingerprint the host. But you don't really need to pay attention to that many of them. You really just need to pay attention to read and write. And in USB mass storage, it's just wrapping SCSI. So all of the commands that are going back and forth are the same ones that were going across the bus to the disk in my SPARC Station 5. It's the same commands. This is using the read 10 and the write 10 commands. 10 means that it's a 10-bit logical block address. So you have 2 to the 10th power blocks of 512 bytes. There are also some descriptor tables, and if you don't have these descriptor tables, then the host doesn't know that you're a random access disk. It thinks that you might instead be a tape or something like that. And you actually can emulate a tape drive or a scanner over USB mass storage, and it works. There are also some lovely kernel bugs that I found that you can trigger with a USB scanner. By refusing to send enough data, it will actually fetch that out of the general pool of memory, and you can see what other users are doing. And once you've got this running, it's a real disk as far as the victim is concerned. You plug it in, it mounts. Here you have it in the Conqueror file manager, and everything is visible because it's a real disk. Here I'm using the FreeDOS 11 or 1.1 CD-ROM. But you can give it any disk image you want, and then the host sees that disk image. If you want to run this today, having a Facedancer board, and there's one for auction at the Hackers for Charity auction, all you do is type goodfet.maxusbmass. You have a space, and then you have the disk image, and then that image appears to the remote host. Now, I told you I'd tell you some nifty anti-forensics tricks that weren't possible before this control of a disk. So when you've got this, and you start paying attention to what the host does, you notice these behaviors that a thumb drive could watch and then respond to. For example, which blocks are read? Right? When you have a legitimate host, it reads the partition tables, whether they're DOS or GPT, and then it reads those partitions. But it doesn't read very far outside of those partitions. So if you have a gap, and something in that gap is read, it's probably a forensics machine that's reading it. Additionally, the forensics lab will intentionally read everything. Right? They read deleted files, they read unallocated partitions, and you can recognize this. You can also recognize the order in which they read these. So the host always reads the parents before the children, right? If it's trying to do /DOS, /whatever, well, first it's got to read the root directory, and then it reads the DOS directory, and then so on. Or win_1, or whatever the fuck it is in these modern newfangled operating systems. I'll get back to the newfangled operating system before. These forensics machines completely ignore it. DD just begins at the beginning and works its way to the end. Right? It doesn't separate for files. You'll see that a legitimate host will actually read the files separately, even if you request ones that are adjacent. Whereas the forensic software reads the beginning to the end. Scott Moulton was telling me that there's really fancy forensic software that can read from the end to the beginning, but that's also easy to match, right? You can also look to see whether the blocks are written. Because in criminal forensics, the one inviolable rule is that you must never, ever write to the disk. And the very first thing that Windows does when you plug it in is that it writes a timestamp to the partition. So what if we had a disk that nukes itself if it sees it being imaged? But additionally, if you don't write the timestamp, the partition is wrong. Well, the effect of that would be that if you use my Thumbdrive through a write blocker, you don't see anything that's secret. So you can directly keep just the criminal forensics guys from being able to read the contents of a disk. Isn't that nifty? So there are other nifty things that you can do, because you can watch what's going on with a reasonable clarity. There are some things that you can't see. One thing that I would love to know but can't is that I never see accesses for files that don't exist. Because the way that a file is fetched by the host operating system is that the directory is grabbed and then read through on the host side. So I don't know what it's looking for that it doesn't find. But I can tell what's there and what's read and what's not read. If you rename something or move something, I see that. So for example, you could make a little ceremony that has to be gone through before a disk unlocks itself. You could have a picture of a banjo dinosaur. I'm also from Southern Appalachia, and we like our banjos and we like our dinosaurs. So if you take your banjo dinosaur, and it's called banjo.jpg, and you rename that to dinosaur.jpg, then the disk can at that point unmount itself and then remount itself as a second hidden volume. Or any sort of ceremony like this, and it can be specific to the individual disk, because you can write all of this in the firmware. So let's hop on the magic school bus, right? The next step of this, of course, is to do it in standalone hardware, and to do it without the dependency of any custom hardware. So the real trick will be doing this as a firmware patch to an existing Hello Kitty thumb drive. And I hope to have that before long. In August, you'll see me coming out with a paper that shows something very similar. And I thank you for your time, and I hope you've had a good day. So one last reminder, the Hackers for Charity booth has the only assembled Facedancer 20 board ever to be sold. And I would appreciate it if you give them a hell of a lot more money than it's worth. Thank you kindly.
All right, so I just want to close things out saying thank you. Thank you. Okay, there's Ted sells these awesome DVDs, and he's also recording Firefox. So please visit him tomorrow and purchase them. I want to thank Joe Klein up front for providing the alcohol this evening for all the speakers. And I hope to see everybody at the Shmoocon party. See you next year. Thanks.
We're going to get 5